Hi, y'all. It's Bridget Cutshaw with Real Things Living. Today, my guest is Kate Lund. She is an author and clinical psychologist. Can you say hi, Kate?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, Bridget.
I think this is awesome. I'm so glad that we connected. We have a lot more in common than I ever expected. She is very resilient. She's gone through some interesting things growing up as a child, and she's now her purpose is to help other people to help grow resilience. And can you, I guess, share a little bit about what happened to you? I know you had hydrocephalus all throughout your childhood, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I was diagnosed with hydrocephalus when I was 4. And it's a tough situation because while it can be managed with something called a shunt, it also requires a lot of time in and out of the hospital to get the shunt fixed and, kind of adjust things. So I had a lot of time in the hospital as a young child and all the way through my adolescence, actually. Um, So coming back to school, looking different, half a head of hair, having to reconnect with peers, catch up on work. So yeah, it was very hard. But I was also very fortunate in that I had a lot of support along the way, and that, helped me to see what was possible on the other side of the challenges.
I think that's great that obviously your parents noticed something was not right, right? You said 4 years old because I'm just curious, what were the symptoms of hydrocephalus?
Yeah, so when a young child or anybody develops hydrocephalus, it's essentially pressure building up on the brain. And so, you get very bad headaches, vomiting, a loss of balance. Your eyes get unfocused. You're unable to focus your eyes. So just a myriad of very difficult symptoms that are not typical for a, once active, happy 4-year-old. And it did actually take a long time for the diagnosis to be made because I was an active, happy 4-year-old, and then things started to slide, and it was really hard in those years. It was the mid 70s, and the imaging wasn't what it is today, right? So it was a lot harder to get those pictures of what exactly was happening inside my brain in the 70s.
Right. I don't know if MRIs were around then. I don't
No,
recall.
those came out in 1989, actually.
Right. Uh,
Yeah.
Your story is just amazing just because it shows your not just resilience, but your tenacity,
Mhm.
right? I think it also gave you a positive outlook and you found a way to be there every day. And you had, you're now a clinical psychologist. And what prompted you to do that because of your experiences to go to school for that?
But I would say so, yeah, because I was always interested in, you know, kind of the human experience. And I think largely because of my own human experience. So I was always drawn in, later elementary school, high school, for example, to volunteering and giving back to those who might be struggling in some way. And that I think just evolved into a really kind of authentic interest in psychology courses. I started taking those in high school, and just really it clicked with me. There were some academic areas that were a little bit more challenging, like, the harder sciences, some advanced math concepts, I think never really got dialed in. I think largely because of missing so much school early on. But for whatever reason, psychology and the behavioral sciences really clicked with me and just became sort of a primary focus. Interestingly, though, I wasn't ready to go back to school, graduate school, when I graduated from college. So I spent 3 years working and living in Washington, D.C., doing broadcast work and PR and marketing for several different television programming stations, the Learning Channel and Discovery Channel. So, it eventually came full circle, but I did kind of, make that pivot for a little bit.
It sounds like when you're in that environment, the media environment, you are seeing so much stuff, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
probably innately clicked in you, right, to learn more about people and how to connect with them.
Absolutely. And there were so many opportunities in that work to be connecting with people. So you're right. There is a clear connection. Just wasn't sort of the medical / clinical focus that I ultimately wanted to have. And I ultimately, did create and do have now.
It also help you grow your resilience, to learn more about how the brain works and how your personality is with experiences. And so one thing, when I looked on your site, and we did talk earlier about sports. So were you, with your hydrocephalus, that obviously growing up affected your ability to do certain sports, but yet you wanted to. So what prompted you, I guess, I know you tried different sports. What one did you love the most, or were you able to do?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. And it's true. I was a very active child, right? And I really wanted to be doing things. And I was sort of a tomboy. I wanted to try all the sports, the more active sports, that sort of thing. But because of the hydrocephalus, contact sports were pretty much out of the question. Even anything where there was a chance that I was going to hit my head was, kind of scary for people around me. Like, for example, how kids are always wearing helmets these days when they're riding bikes and
Yeah.
skating and all these things. Well, helmets weren't cool back then, but I had to wear a giant hockey helmet whenever I was skating with my class. And
Oh, wow.
that definitely got some laughs from my peers, but that's a whole nother story. But to make a long story short, you asked about the sports thing, and tennis became my sport. For whatever reason, my parents gave me a tennis racket, when I was like 6 or something. And I was always playing with a tennis ball and throwing it up and, doing various things. And really that became my main sport. And it became really, really important for me because a lot of my friends were connected to tennis. And I was able to see myself as having a really kind of specific ability that was really important for me because there were so many things that were either hard or I flat out couldn't do. So having tennis as sort of a mainstay was a really, really important thing for me. And I just loved it. And I played all the way through for a couple of years in college.
Wow. So to me, tennis, when you mention that you throw the ball there, you're kind of connecting your mind and body. You think it helped your brain heal a little bit, maybe?
I
You
would
know,
say definitely, definitely, because hitting the strokes and hitting the forehands, the serve, yeah, everything for sure, definitely helped on that level. And I would say that you know each time I had to have surgery to fix my shunt or had a medical setback of some sort, I had to come back and I had to rebuild in some way. Um, so I absolutely think that's a great point for sure. It was part of the healing process at
that is,
points.
I just think sports in general, it was healing for me as well, and different reasons, but it's healing physically and mentally and emotionally. And I think that's a good point. I think that's why I've always encouraged people to get involved in movement or sports in some shape or form.
Absolutely. And I think also an important point there is it's really important to kind of see it within your own unique context. And
Mm.
that's, what I was able to do with tennis because while I was pretty good, I wasn't the best. And I've got many, many, many second place trophies. Never did I get that first place trophy, right? But that was okay for me because I was just so happy to be out there playing. Doesn't mean that, if I had a really bad day on the court, I wasn't disappointed or upset with myself, but just that fundamental sort of sense of being out there was really, really important to me. And I think really meant a lot in my ability to move forward.
And it was connecting you to other people too, not just, right? You had that connection with other tennis players. And
Yeah.
I just think we learn from each other when we're on a team. Is that the right word? I must, I, like I mentioned before, I wasn't good at tennis, right? And that's probably why I'm a better runner. Just, I don't know why it's the way my body is built, probably
hmm
as well. The structure of my,
Yeah, and it's the structure and just what your body is innately able to do. And I'll tell you quite honestly, I was not fast on the tennis court.
uh,
And particularly now, today, in my advanced age, I'm definitely not fast on the tennis court. And but that, again, had to focus on my strengths as a tennis player to do as well as I could do. And, I think the relationships, you made that point as well, were so important. A lot of my best friends from that time in my life are still friends today. And we had the tennis connection.
That is so cool. Do you still play tennis now? Just, I mean, occasionally or?
Well, so I picked it up again when one of my boys started playing, and we played a lot. But he has sort of pivoted to rowing and crew at this juncture. So he's not playing as much. So it means I'm not playing as much. I'm at points tempted to pick it up in a women's league or something like that, but I've got so much else on my plate that I'm
Right.
sort of focusing on the more global fitness things like the Peloton and walking, and I work out a little bit on the erg here at the house. That's a indoor rowing machine. So yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, rowing is kind of when you're thinking that's physical, very physical with your upper body, just kind of like I think tennis. I mean, that's kind of how I think of it. I have an issue, I don't know, like I said, with my shoulders, neck. I probably because I've
Mm.
had some injuries back in the day, falling and not having a helmet on.
Ooh, yeah, yeah.
I had no fear as a kid. Is that the right word?
Yeah, and that's a great point, because I had a lot of fear, right? Because of my experiences, and I wasn't always sort of overt fear, but I had to be very cautious, and that got
Right. You had
wired
different
into
situations.
me sort of, and for better or for worse, I'm sure there are instances where that still holds me back on certain levels, but it is what it is. But I think that's so interesting. So you were the kind of kid who had no fear and just went for it.
And I'm still here. I'm just kidding. No, I think it had a lot to do with an older brother who I had looked up to, right? And he's was very athletic, and so I'm like, I'm going to be like him. But I didn't have the skill set as him. I didn't know, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Just but like I grew up in the '70s.
sure.
You're on skateboards. We didn't have helmets.
Right.
Go down on a hill on a skateboard. What was I thinking? I only fell one time and I never did it again because the wheels hit some like dirt or something. So the wheels
Mhm.
aren't going to continue. Just things like that. But I think, but I appreciate that that I had that opportunity. And you'd mentioned you have sons, so I'm sure you and I have that in common. We are boys of mom, and we were meant to be,
Mhm.
and you can handle that
Oh
uh,
yeah.
better. But I think it's great that you've got them involved in sports because I just think that teaches them a lot about resilience. It doesn't have to be professional level, but just in getting out there and learning about themselves too.
Exactly. Yes, that is so important, because the thing is, um, sports will teach all of us so much. And also finding the right sport for a certain kid is important, or that kid finding the sport himself. And I've seen that play out differently with both my boys. And it's just, so rewarding to see things click for them and see what they're learning and see how that's adding to their sense of themselves and their sense of possibility and ability, what they're able to accomplish out there in the world. And particularly for one of my boys, I see it translating very clearly back into how he believes in himself in the classroom and what
That's
he's able to accomplish. So it's all connected, right?
right. You're getting out there physically moving your body, but you are again and connecting with other people. And I think it helps you grow your mind, your thought process, and to not judge yourself. I think a lot of people are afraid to do sports for some reason. They don't think they're capable of it, but you are, again, going back to you, a capable of, you had hydrocephalus and you're able to try different things and play tennis, right?
Mhm.
And so what sports are your sons playing other, you said the one is rowing.
Yeah,
So,
they're actually both rowing now, if you could
oh, that's
believe it.
awesome.
One of them has been rowing for a couple years with his school, and the other one just started at a different school. They're both freshmen, they're twins. And there is a really great rowing club 2 blocks from William's school. And he was like, hey, I think I'm going to try this. And we're like, all right, cool. And he went through the winter conditioning program, and that was so valuable. Really met all these kids, really had to push himself physically, but so valuable for him, because I think it taught him or showed him what he was capable of. And so now he's transitioning to the phase where they're actually getting in the boats, and he's learning a whole different skill set, which is a big deal. And I'm positive about it. I think it's going to be great. And my other one, who's been rowing for 2 years, has gotten really into it, and he's very serious and quite accomplished already. And so, a little bit of a different trajectory, but also so positive.
So they're rowing on lakes, I'm assuming.
Yeah, they are. Each of them, yeah, they're different lakes. One of them's through his school, so his boathouse is down in a different part of town, and then the other one is on a lake right next to his school.
That is really cool. I don't remember having that available, of course, when I was young. Right. But I did the same thing. We tried different things for our sons just to try what their skill set was. And they both tried running. They're really fast, but they didn't like it.
Right.
And
And that can happen, right? And then
right,
having that pivot to trying something else, and maybe that won't work either, but then there's another pivot and that does click. And it's always a process, right?
right. But they enjoyed it, but they didn't want to do it in high school. My elder son did it in high school. He was really a fast. He was actually better on the track than he was long distance, like his mother. But my younger son got into the running, and went into playing ice hockey, which that is good and bad. We had to have, pay for shouldn't say training, but that's a skill that you got to learn.
Yeah, there's a lot of training and early mornings at the rink, right? And travel. I bet you traveled a lot as a hockey mom.
But at the same, I made such great connections with just
Yeah.
the parents too.
Right.
And it's just I call it a family. I think that's why it's a, community kind of thing. And I think that's why you find your community based on what your interests are.
I absolutely agree.
And you have to have similar, I don't know, you meet people you never would have thought you would have ever met.
Exactly. Exactly. And those connections become quite powerful, right? Quite long term. And that, yeah, has definitely been my experience, over the years with tennis and such, and all sorts of things. And now kind of see it developing with the boys also.
And I think sports is an important aspect and a role in kids. And do you recommend a certain age? I'm just curious to start kids in this kind of sport, because some of them are too young to be playing hockey, in my opinion, as an example.
Yeah, I think there's not really a one size fits all. I mean, from a psychological perspective, sort of avoiding too much pressure and avoiding kind of targeted specialization too early is in
Yes.
my opinion a good idea, sort of avoiding those things. But in terms of starting, kids can start in so many different ways, just by playing around with a ball, or skating around on a pond if it's frozen enough, or whatever.
Right.
Doesn't have to be super competitive.
Right. And that's kind of my husband was a hockey player, by the way, from up north. So that's what he lived. And
Ah.
so we tried different sports, like I mentioned earlier, but my younger son begged us for him to play hockey. And my husband said, you don't know what you're getting yourself into, because I didn't grow up around that. But my
Yes.
son only did it because he loved it.
Yep.
He
And
continued to like it. Right.
yes.
And he didn't want to, when he graduated high school, he didn't continue. But that's him, not me playing hockey. Right.
Right.
And I
Exactly.
think a lot of parents, what I've seen, were pushing their kids to do certain things. That's kind of what I was kind of implying earlier. They push them to do certain sports which I don't think is good for them.
Right. And particularly not if it's not a connect with their aptitudes or their passions or interests, that kind of a thing. If there's a true sort of passion, like your son was displaying,
Mhm.
and it seemed like he was really adept at it too, very, very
Yes.
good at the skills, then all good, go for it. But to be forcing a kid to play any sort of sport when that's not a match for them does not help them, in the
Yeah, I
long
have
run.
seen it. And we even tried, one of the things we tried was like baseball. And I found that to be I'm sorry, I found it to be boring because there was no running around involved, right? And my
Right.
I think they both did it for a couple of years, and they're both. It's when they realized I wanted something with movement, more movement.
Sure. Yeah,
And
there's a lot of downtime on the baseball field.
yeah, I mean it's fine for some people, but
Sure.
kids are like nah. And anyway, I think your story again is so beautiful, and I'm glad that you went to become a psychologist to help people heal. I think it's a way of healing and finding different ways, and your focus is helping parents, right?
Yeah, helping parents, I do work with folks across the lifespan, but I do an awful lot of work with kids and families, really helping parents to see, the possibilities for their children who are struggling in a variety of different ways. And oftentimes that's really, challenging for parents. They get stuck in the struggle. And so to try to open that lens and help them to see beyond the struggle into the possibility is really a key piece of my work. And then building those core skills of resilience, both, for the child as well as for the parent, and the whole family system, um, moving forward. That's the big idea.
Yeah, it's so important because a lot of people, they have different kind of pressure now in a way that we did when we were
Mhm.
younger. We didn't have, thank goodness, it didn't have social media. Uh,
Right. Yeah.
that's another, yeah, another. I'm not gonna go down that path, but yeah, that's a different kind of, yeah, pressure. We were just let outside. I
Mhm.
was anyway.
Yeah. Go outside and play and yeah.
And
Mhm.
that's kind of what it was. And I think we need to, I like the idea of being able to have a little bit of freedom for
Mhm.
that. Maybe that's just my personality.
Yeah, no, there's definite value in that, right? In terms of building sense of self, building confidence, building problem solving skills, all of those things come from that ability to kind of be out there, playing outside, experimenting with different things, using imagination. And yeah, social media has sort of shifted the trajectory on all that a little bit.
Right. And you'd mentioned the relationship between parents and kids. I think you probably agree with this. They should guide their kids and not tell them what to do.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's really, really important. And that sort of evolves kind of along the developmental continuum, but absolutely sort of really trying to understand the experience of their child and sort of, guide according to that, as opposed to deciding from the outside in and saying, you need to do this because I did this. That's not helpful.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what parents are telling what sports their kids should be in.
Right.
It's a big circle. Everybody's life is not perfect, and we
Right.
have to learn from mistakes and move on a little bit. I think you talk about onward, how important that is. And
Hmm. Yeah, moving forward, sort of finding ways to move through and beyond challenges as they come up, because challenge is inevitable. We're all going to face challenges every day, and unfortunately there's no off button for challenges. And so figuring out how to circumvent, move through and beyond those challenges is so important so that we can have a sense of moving onward.
so I think what you're doing is so helpful to help people learn about that, and they have to be open to that. And I think it's so cool. My last question is what was the biggest lesson you learned from, I guess, having boys? Just because they're boys. I mean, what is the biggest lesson you learned from them? Because you're not a boy, right?
Right. I'm not a boy. Right. Yeah. The biggest lesson from them, just how um boys see, because I have twins, right? How boys can be, the exact same age, the exact same sort of early exposures in terms of, our parenting, that sort of thing, but be so totally different. But it's so cool, right? Two very different boys who are best friends, who are offering so much. And I think that's one of the biggest observations that I've made, which I think translates into a lesson, because you never know what is coming next with them.
I think it's beautiful, and you're so lucky to have.
Yes.
I mean, you are. I mean, think about it.
Oh, oh
It's
yeah.
very lucky. And one of my hockey player son, he has two friends, or I shouldn't say two friends. They're twins. You know what I'm saying? So he has four friends that are twins, and they're like you said, they're so different. They look similar. They're
Right.
identical twins, both sets, but they
Yeah.
have such different personalities. But it's it is so fun to learn from. I learn so much from my sons, and that's kind of why I was asking you that question. And they are very resilient,
Yes.
and because they've had issues.
Yeah, it's everybody, right? And I think encouragement, sort of from a different angle, for example, I, was kind of talking about starting a podcast for a very long time.
Right.
And sometime this summer, one of my boys, he was just like, "Mom, seriously, just hit record." And I was a little bogged down by the tech and the thought of it and all that, but then this opportunity came up and I mentioned it one night at dinner, and he's like, "No, seriously." I said, "Just hit record." And you know what? I did. And I'm so happy that I did. It's awesome.
Right. Your son says like my older son. I started blogging because he's like, Mom, just you're a good writer. Just put it out there. I'm like, what? I didn't never, we're from that generation where we didn't share much. We're
Yes.
both
Yes.
learning from our children. Anybody can learn. It's not just the parent knows everything. And that's kind of why I think you got to connect with them. And
Precisely. And yes, connect with them, understand their experience, have transparency in the relationship. I think, as parents, it's also important to share some of our own struggles with our kids,
yes,
such that they see us on that human level.
yes. And it's such a beautiful thing. So where can people learn more about you, Kate?
Well, I have a website. It's www.katelundspeaks.com. And that's a great spot. I'm also on LinkedIn, Kate.Lund. And yeah, I would say those are the best ways.
That's awesome. And for those that are listening, I'll have those links included in the description. And I loved our conversation, Kate.
I did as well. Thank you, Bridget.
All right. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.